to the comments of my colleagues, and I've listened over the past couple of weeks as this issue has been discussed, and I tell you, for me, it's not a hard decision. I stand with the Constitution. I stand with what the Constitution makes clear. The people and the states hold the power here, not us. My oath to the Constitution and my reverence for our democratic principles make it easy for me to confirm these state certifications. By the way, I posed this process some 15 years ago when some Democrats chose to object to the electors from my home state of Ohio after the 2004 elections. I opposed it then, and I oppose it now. I said at the time, Congress must not thwart the will of the people. That's what we would be doing. Let's assume for a moment that those who object to the certifications are right, that the Constitution intended that a bare majority of members of Congress could circumvent the states that have chosen to certify the popular votes of their own state citizens. I ask the objectors to think about the precedent that would be set if we were to do that. What if the majority in the House and the Senate was of the other party when a presidential candidate of our party came through a close presidential election? Would you want a Congress controlled by the Democrats to play the role you now intend for us? It is asking Congress to substitute its judgment for the judgment of the voters, and its judgment for the judgment of the states that certified the results. And even forgetting the dangerous precedent that would be set, what would be the basis for objecting in this election? Look, I voted for President Trump. I supported him because I believe the Trump administration's policies are better for Ohio and for the country. And I supported the Trump campaign's right to pursue recounts. They had every right to do it. And legal challenges. I agree that there were instances of fraud and irregularities in the 2020 elections. I think we all do. And by the way, there is fraud and irregularities in every presidential election. But it is also true that after 2 months of recounts and legal challenges, not a single state recount changed the result. And of the dozens of lawsuits filed, not one found evidence of fraud or irregularities widespread enough to change the result of the election. This was the finding of numerous Republican-appointed judges and the Trump administration's own Department of Justice. Every state has now weighed in and chosen to certify its electoral slate based on the popular vote as set out in the Constitution. I understand that many Americans who would never storm this Capitol don't trust the integrity of the 2020 election, don't think the states should have certified, don't think we should have accepted the results from the states, and are insisting on more transparency and accountability. In the 2016 elections, lest we forget, many Democrats objected to the results and distrusted the election. I challenge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to listen, but also to do our part to try to restore faith in our elections. Mr. President, we should all work to improve the integrity of the electoral system and the confidence of the American people in this bedrock of our great democratic republic. Today, I'll do my constitutional duty and oppose these efforts to reject the state-certified results. And tomorrow, in the wake of this attack on the Capitol, the pandemic that engulfs us, and other national challenges, let's work together for the people. Yield back.
Democratic leader.
Mr. President, I believe we have 8 minutes left, so I'd like to divide 4 to Senator King and 4 to Senator Van Hollen.
That's correct, Leader.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
Mr. President, Winston Churchill once said that he could do a 2-hour speech extemporaneously, but a 10-minute speech took immense preparation. I don't know what he would have said about a 4-minute speech. We are a 240-year anomaly in world history. We think that what we have here in this country is the way it's always been. It is a very unusual form of government. The normal form of government throughout world history is dictators, kings, czars, pharaohs, warlords, tyrants. And we thought 20 years ago the march of history was toward democracy, but it is in retreat in Hungary and Turkey. Goodness knows in Russia. Democracy as we have practiced it is fragile. It's fragile and it rests upon trust. It rests upon trust in facts. It rests upon trust in courts, in public officials, and yes, in elections. I don't sympathize or justify or in any way support, that's putting it mildly, what happened here today, but I understand it. I understand it because I saw those people interviewed today and they said, we're here because this election has been stolen. And the reason they said that is that their leader has been telling them that every day for 2 months. We cannot afford to pull bricks out from the foundation of trust that underlies our entire system. And I agree with Governor Romney that the answer to this problem is to tell people the truth, is to tell them what happened. It's easy to confront your opponents. It's hard to confront your friends. It's hard to tell your supporters something they don't want to hear. But that's our obligation. That's why the word leader is applied to people in jobs like ours. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be something that we take on as a sacred obligation. And if people believe something that isn't true, it's our obligation to tell them, no, I'm sorry, it isn't. Just as Senator Portman just said, as Mike Lee just said, I'm sorry, we can't do this here. We don't want to do this here. This is a power reserved to the states, not to the Congress. And I agree with the majority leader. I think this is one of the most important votes any of us will ever take. On December 1st, 1862, Abraham Lincoln came to this building. He came to this building in the darkest days of the Civil War. He was trying to awaken the Congress to the crisis that we were facing. And he didn't feel that they were fully and effectively engaged. And he ended his speech that day with words that I think have an eerie relevance tonight. Here's what Abraham Lincoln said. Fellow Americans, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. And here's his final words. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. The fiery trial through which
we represent to stand athwart the long arm of the federal government.
Sorry.
I submit this respectfully and humbly.
Emma, that's different. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
I rise in support of the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, for years, Democrats and their media allies deceived America about Trump-Russian collusion and the extent of foreign interference in the 2016 elections. Yet in 2020, Democrats promoted massive foreign interference in American elections by helping illegal aliens and other non-citizens vote in American elections, thereby canceling the votes of and stealing elections from American citizens. Want evidence? Exhibit A. In 1993, Democrats rammed through Congress the National Voter Registration Act, making it illegal to require proof of citizenship that prevents illegal aliens and non-citizens from registering to vote. Why did Democrats do that? Simple. To steal elections, of course. Exhibit B. How bad is the non-citizen voting problem? In 2005, Democrat President Jimmy Carter's Commission on Federal Election Reform warned that, quote, non-citizens have registered to vote in several recent elections, end quote, and recommended that, quote, all states should use their best efforts to obtain proof of citizenship before registering voters, end quote. Exhibit C, a June 2005 General Accountability Office report discovered that up to 3% of people on voter registration lists are not U.S. citizens. Exhibit D, in 2008, Electoral Study surveyed 339 non-citizens. 8% admitted voting in American elections. As an aside, I have seen higher percentages in other studies. Exhibit E, the 2010 census counted 11 million illegal aliens in America. Exhibit F, a 2018 Yale study estimated as many as 22 million illegal aliens in America. Exhibit G, the math means between 880,000 and 1.72 million illegal aliens illegally voted in the 2020 elections. Exhibit H, in 2014, Old Dominion University and George Mason University professors surveyed non-citizens and illegal aliens and found they vote Democrat roughly 80% of the time. Exhibit I, the math is again straightforward. The 60% Biden advantage times the illegal alien voting number means Joe Biden gained roughly 1,032,000 votes from illegal alien voting. That's the high number. Exhibit J, while no one knows for sure how massive the illegal alien voting bloc is, we do know Joe Biden and his campaign believed it large enough and critical enough to winning the presidential race that at the October 22nd presidential debate, Joe Biden publicly solicited the illegal alien bloc vote by promising, quote, within 100 days, I'm going to send to the United States Congress a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Speaker, that is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for illegal aliens. Joe Biden knew exactly what he was doing by seeking the illegal alien bloc vote. After all, on May 11th, 1993, then Senator Joe Biden voted for the National Voter Registration Act that makes it illegal to require proof of citizenship from illegal aliens and other non-citizens when they seek to register to vote. Madam Speaker, the evidence is compelling and irrefutable. Non-citizens overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden in exchange for the promised amnesty and citizenship, and in so doing, helped steal the election from Donald Trump, Republican candidates, and American citizens across America. Madam Speaker, in my judgment, if only lawful votes cast by eligible American citizens are counted, Joe Biden lost and President Trump won the Electoral College. As such, it is my constitutional duty to promote honest and accurate elections by rejecting Electoral College vote submissions from states whose electoral systems are so badly flawed as to render their vote submissions unreliable, untrustworthy, and unworthy of acceptance. Madam Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time to the opposition.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York State seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a proud Republican, I rise in opposition to the objection to the electors.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I come to this side of the aisle as a proud Republican, but most importantly, as a proud American. Today we saw an assault on our democracy. I love this institution. I love the United States Congress. And I love the United States of America. And what I saw today was mob rule that spat upon the blood of my father, that is in the soil of Europe and in the soil of Korea, and who gave us, through that blood, this sacred Constitution and the sacred ability to lead this world as a power that says we settle our differences not with mob rule, we settle our differences through elections. And when those elections are over, we have a peaceful transition of power. Now, make no mistake to my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle. I will be passionate in my disagreement with you. I will be passionate in my ideas for the future of this country. And I will fight for my Republican ideas that I hold near and dear. But I will stand with you tonight and send a message to the nation and all Americans that what we saw today was not American, and what we see tonight in this body shall be what we do in America, and that is to transfer power in a peaceful way. And with that, I yield to my best friend in Congress and a Democrat, Josh Gottheimer, my co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
I thank my friend for yielding and for standing with me and with all of us. Tom Reed is my co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's a Republican and I'm a Democrat. When it comes to policy views, we often disagree. But at the end of the day, we are united as first. Today, a group of lawless, but their attempt to obstruct democracy failed. Their insurrection was foiled. The American people and the greatest democracy the world has ever known won. Abraham Lincoln, who served in this very body, famously said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." That's why, for the sake of this country, we must stand together, united, and celebrate a peaceful transition of power. In 14 days, President-elect Biden will be sworn in, and despite all of our differences, I have faith that for the American people, we will come together, Democrats and Republicans, committed to unity, civility, and truth. We will recognize our higher purpose to help America through these dark days. That is the only way we will beat COVID, rebuild our economy, and stand up to threats at home and abroad. Working together as Democrats and Republicans, I know our best days will always be ahead of us. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to always search their conscience and their souls. And I respect my Republican colleagues and my Democratic colleagues. But today, let us pause, recognizing that what we do here today will set the course of this institution for years to come. And this institution, Madam Speaker, shall not fail, because the United States of America shall forever be the beacon of hope, the inspiration to all, and may God bless our great country. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My constitutional oath is sacred, and I have a duty to speak out about confirmed evidence-filled issues with the administration of the 2020 presidential election in certain battleground states. Signature verification, ballot observation, voter roll integrity, voter ID requirements, and ballot collection protections were weakened on top of the millions of mailboxes that were flooded with unrequested mail-in ballots. Many of my constituents have been outraged and demanding that I voice their objections here today. This debate is necessary because rogue election officials, secretaries of state, and courts circumvented state election laws. They made massive changes to how their state's election would be run. These acts, among other issues, were unlawful and unconstitutional. Congress has the duty to defend the Constitution and any powers of state legislatures that were usurped. Some claim today's objections set new precedent by challenging state electors. That claim, of course, ignores that Democrats have objected every time a Republican presidential candidate has won an election over the past generation. If you don't have any objections today, that's your call, but don't lecture about precedent. Over the past 4 years, Democrats boycotted President Trump's inauguration and State of the Union addresses, pushed the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracies and investigations and knowingly lied about it, voted to impeach the president before even knowing what to impeach him for, and then actually passed articles of impeachment before Senate Democrats voted to remove him from office. Today's debate is necessary, especially because of the insistence that everything President Trump and his supporters say about the 2020 election is evidence-free. That's simply not true. No one can honestly claim it's evidence-free when I say that in Arizona, courts unilaterally extended the legislatively set deadline to register to vote. The Arizona State Senate issued subpoenas post-election to get information from the Maricopa County Board on various election matters. But the board and the courts refused to help at all to let the state Senate complete its constitutional duties. In Pennsylvania, where state legislators wrote us about their powers being usurped, the Democrat majority on the state Supreme Court changed signature matching, and postal marking requirements. The date to submit mail-in ballots was extended, contradictory to the date set by state law. The state legislature expanded no-excuse mail-in balloting without a constitutional amendment. Constitutions apply to the acts of all branches of government. The issue is magnified by the voter rolls being so inaccurate that more voters submitted ballots than there were registered voters. Signature authentication rules for absentee and mail-in ballots were weakened by the Democrat Secretary of the Commonwealth without authorization. Ballot defects were allowed to be cured in some counties, but not others. There were poll watchers denied the ability to closely observe ballot counting operations. In Georgia, the Secretary of State unilaterally entered into a settlement agreement with the Democratic Party, changing statutory requirements for confirming voter identity. Challenging defective signatures was made far more difficult, and the settlement even required election officials to consider issuing training materials drafted by an expert retained by the Democratic Party. In Wisconsin, election officials assisted voters on how to circumvent the state's voter ID laws and signature verification laws, while also placing unmanned drop boxes in locations picked to boost Democrat turnout. The Democracy in the Park event in Wisconsin had over 17,000 ballots transferred that shouldn't have been. These are all facts, and certainly not evidence-free. Americans deserve nothing less than full faith and confidence in their elections, and a guarantee that their vote, their voice counts, and that their concerns are being heard. That's why we need to have this debate today, whether you like it or not. This isn't about us. This is about our Constitution, our elections. This is about our people and our republic. I yield back.
Mayor Diego. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I am the proud son of immigrants. Growing up, I heard stories about parties, politicians, and presidents invalidating elections from the people that took power for themselves. That's why when I joined the Marine Corps, the most sacred part of my oath was to protect the Constitution of the United States. I never thought I would have to do that on the floor of Congress. But here we are. The people have spoken, and the power of the people, the Constitution will be preserved. Madam Speaker, I left my youth. I left my sanity. I left it all in Iraq for this country because there was this one precious idea that we all had, that we all believed, that this country was going to protect everyone's individual rights, that you were going to be able to vote, that you were going to be able to preserve democracy and pass it on as a legacy, as an inheritance to every American. But today there was treason in this house. Today there was traitors in this house. So I'm not asking my Republican colleagues to help me and stop this objection to Arizona. I'm asking you to get off all these objections. It is time for you to save your soul. It is time for you to save your country. That man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue will forget you. He will use you, and he will dump you to the side. But what will be left will be the stain of democracy that you are engaging in right now. Listen to yourselves. I consider most of you very, believe it or not. But the idea that we would rig an election for the president, but not preserve the congressional seats for all of our friends that we just lost in the last election is absurd. The idea that we would help Vice President Biden win, but wouldn't make sure that we got enough senators in the Senate for us to pass our full agenda is absurd. The idea that there is somehow nefarious voter registration in Arizona that tipped the scale, when because during that same time of voter registration, there were more registered voters that were Republican than Democrats. You are better than this. Many of you did serve. Many of you have never served. But there is an opportunity and a time for courage. I hope you never have to face fire or bullets or bombs for your country. But right now, this country is asking you to be better. Right now, this country is asking you to show courage. That man will leave. Your soul will stay with you for the rest of your life. You owe it to democracy. You sacrificed their life. You know better. You are better. Be the good American. Be the American you want. Preserve this democracy. Reject this movement. And stop this terrorism that is happening from the White House. I yield back my time.
Members are reminded to redirect their remarks to the chair. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To speak in favor of the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, it's been quite a day, and in contrast to the gentleman's comments just and they aren't dumb. They aren't mindless. They don't believe things simply because the president says them. There were problems. I know that Joe Biden will be president. But I don't know that it hurts or would hurt any of us to have the generosity of spirit to continue to reflect on what might be better or what might seriously have gone wrong here, even if you reject the notion that the result was wrong. I'd like to offer a slightly, perhaps it will be rejected. I think if I were sitting on the other side of the aisle, it would be very difficult for me to listen to tonight, but you all have heard it said, and it certainly is true, that many executive branch officials around the nation departed from state legislatures, enacted laws. I think it's less understood how this came to pass. It was not a spontaneous, independent decision-making, but it resulted, I would argue, from a coordinated nationwide partisan plan And the fact and scope of Mark Elias appeared in hundreds of cases across the country in the course of the election year. This plan was not a response to COVID, by the way. It pre-existed that, and his website shows that as well. He explained that in January 2020. It was a chaos strategy, a plan to flood state and federal courts with hundreds of simultaneous election year lawsuits aimed at displacing state legislative control. Now, as I've seen it, only the most experienced and independent judges appear to have recognized what was afoot. In the Fourth Circuit, dissenting judges Wilkinson and Agee said this: "Let's understand the strategy that is being deployed here. Our country is now plagued with a proliferation of pre-election litigation." And as they put it, 385 election year cases to that point on October 20th. And they referred to the rating as a judicial one. And in keeping with that, it featured gross breaches of litigation ethics, forum shopping, repetitive suits after losses, and collusive settlements with cooperating Democratic officials of state and local governments. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what led to officials changing the rules in state after state, mainly through consent orders or the preliminary unreviewed decisions of state and federal trial judges, about which so many Americans are angry and disheartened. I think we can do better. I think that strategy was unwise. And I think, particularly in light of what's happened here today, we should. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise tonight in opposition to the objection. An unprecedented effort to ignore the will of the American people and the people of Arizona. Given the facts, the unprecedented events of tonight, this effort must be finished, and America can be united again. That is going to take leadership. We are all leaders. We are elected to be leaders. And if we're going to do that, we have to do it from the respect to others, the idea that truth is important, that factual content is important, that we're going to tell the American people what is going on in this country and not what we hope they hear from a 30-second soundbite. I used to be a homicide investigator. My job was to follow the facts, develop a case, make decisions and recommendations based on where those facts led me. Following the process means that decisions cannot be made on 2020, over 65% of eligible Arizonans voted in record number. Our Republican governor, Republican Attorney General, Democratic Secretary of State, and our state's election administrators and volunteers worked with integrity to administer a fair election. We saw turnout increase in both Republican and Democratic areas, and in fact, more Republicans registered this election than any other party. The fact is, multiple federal, state judges, agencies, state elected officials concluded the winner was Joe Biden. In Arizona, this process was administered and overseen by officials from both parties. Elections officials conducted random, hand-counted audits of many precincts. They confirmed there were no errors that would change the result of the election. The fact is that the Republican chairman of Maricopa County, the largest Republican county in the state, the biggest population county, he stated more than 2 million ballots were cast, and there was no evidence of fraud or misconduct or malfunction. He concluded, no matter how you voted, this election was administered with integrity, transparency, and in accordance with state laws. The fact is, the president and his campaign and several Republican-led groups filed 8 election lawsuits, all of which were dismissed. The Arizona Supreme Court, a body where all justices have been appointed by Republican governors, unanimously dismissed the case. The justices found that the party had failed to present any evidence of misconduct or illegal votes, let alone establish any degree of fraud or a significant error rate that would undermine the certainty of the election results. After these judicial rulings, the governor said, "I trust our election system. There's integrity in our election system." The fact is, Joe Biden is the certified winner of Arizona's 11 electoral votes. Arizona's elected and appointed officials from both parties followed the facts and came to this conclusion. I urge my colleagues to do the same. To my colleagues across the aisle, I know we may disagree on who we want as president, but what we personally want is not what matters here. Rather, the people's influence, as reflected in the certified electoral college results, is what matters. Facts matter. Undermining faith in our election process by attempting to mislead the American public only serves to weaken us and make us vulnerable to foreign actors who would do us harm. For the good of our country, this must stop. Now is the time to come together to preserve our democracy and to protect our national security. I know my constituents are looking to Congress to move past its divisions, find common ground, and pass legislation to improve the lives of struggling families. We must stay focused on fighting the pandemic. We must work to ensure all Americans can be vaccinated as soon as possible so we can save American lives. Safely reopen schools, get people back to work, and visit loved ones again. I urge my colleagues to follow this, and Madam Speaker, I yield.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to claim time in support of the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes without objection.
Madam Speaker, one of the first things we did when the House convened today was to join together to extend our grace and our kindness and our concern for a colleague who has experienced just an insurmountable amount of grief with his family. And I want all of our fellow Americans watching to know that we did that because we care about each other and we don't want bad things to happen to each other. And our heart hurts when they're due. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of folks over there who don't like me too much, and there are a few of you that I don't care for too much. But if anybody had been hurt today, it would have been even more of a catastrophe than we already saw. And I think that's an important point for the country. Another important point for the country is that this morning, President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful. He was far more, you can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit about his calls for peace than some of the BLM and left-wing rioters were this summer when we saw violence sweep across this nation. Now, we came here today to debate, to follow regular order, to offer an objection, to follow a process that is expressly contemplated in our Constitution. And for doing that, we got called a bunch of seditious traitors. Now, not since 1985 has a Republican president been sworn in, absent some Democrat effort, to object to the electors. But when we do it, it is the new violation of all norms. And when those things are said, people get angry. Now, I know there are many countries where political violence may be necessary, but America is not one such country. Madam Speaker, it was wrong when people vandalized and defaced your home. It was wrong when thugs went to Senator Hawley's home. And I don't know if the reports are true, but the Washington Times has just reported some pretty compelling evidence from a facial recognition company showing that some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters and, in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa. Now, we should seek to build America up, not tear her down and destroy her. And I am sure glad that at least for one day, I didn't hear my Democrat colleagues calling to defund the police. Now, I appreciate all the talk. Now, I appreciate all the talk of coming together, But let us not pretend that our colleagues on the left have been free of some anti-democratic impulses just because we signed on to legal briefs and asked courts to resolve disputes. There were some on the left who said that we should not even be seated in the body, that we ought to be prosecuted, maybe even jailed. Those arguments anger people, but people do understand the concepts of basic fairness. And no competition, contest, or election can be deemed fair if the participants are subject to different rules. Baseball teams that cheat and steal signs should be stripped of their championships. Russian Olympians who cheat and use steroids should be stripped of their medals, and states that do not run clean elections should be stripped of their electors. This fraud was systemic. It was repeated. It was the same system, and I dare say it was effective. We saw circumstances where when Democrat operatives couldn't get the outcomes they wanted in state legislators, when they couldn't get the job done there, they went and pressured and litigated and usurped the Constitution with extra constitutional action of some officials in some states. They fraudulently laundered ballots, votes, voter registration forms, and then they limited review. In 2016, Democrats found out that they couldn't beat Donald Trump at the ballot box with voters who actually show up, so they turned to impeachment and the witness box. And when that failed, they ran to the mailbox, where this election saw an unprecedented amount of votes that could not be authenticated with true ID, with true signature match, and with true confidence for the American people. Our Article III courts have failed by not holding evidentiary hearings to weigh the evidence. We should not join in that failure. We should vindicate the rights of states. We should vindicate the subpoenas in Arizona that have been issued to get a hold of these voting machines, and we should reject these electors. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield my time to the Dean of the Arizona delegation, Mr. Grijalva.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the gentlelady from Colorado for yielding time. I'll be very brief, Madam Speaker. There's really nothing left to say. This challenge brought by members of this House, Republican members from this House from Arizona, and a senator from Texas. The whole discussion today, this challenge to the 11 electoral votes that are designated for President Biden and Vice President Harris, the discussion today proved there is no merit to denying those electoral votes. There's no legal standing. The courts have proven that in Arizona time and time again. There is no precedent. There is no constitutional violation. But we're here today, Madam Speaker, because of one man and those who are desperate to please him. So what do we have to show for this process today? Fear, a lockdown, violence, and regrettably and sadly death, arrest, present and real danger, threats, and assault on our institution, this House, this Congress, and the very democracy that we practice here. And to what end? What did we accomplish? The reality is that the challenge will be defeated come January 20th. President Biden and President Harris will be the President and Vice President of the United States. So what have we accomplished? To further divide this nation, to continue to fan the same rhetoric of division and us versus them, to paralyze and dismantle our democracy? Is that what attempting to accomplish today. The mob that attacked this institution, I hold no member specifically responsible for that madness that was around us. But we do share a responsibility, my friends, to end it. It's past time to accept reality, to reaffirm our democracy, and move on. I would urge my colleagues from Arizona who filed this challenge to withdraw their challenge to Arizona and to the electors that have been chosen to reject this challenge and defend all voters, defend the voters of Arizona, and that democracy that we practice daily in the representation of our constituents. That's what's at stake today. And with that, I yield back to the gentlelady from Colorado and thank her for the time.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, on Sunday, every member in this chamber took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And there's only one vote tonight for those who took that oath, and that vote is to reject this challenge. I yield back.
All the time for debate has expired. The question is, shall the objection to the Arizona Electoral College vote count submitted by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and the senator from Texas, Mr. Cruz, be agreed to? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No! Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Speaker?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
We would ask for a roll call.
The yeas and nays have been requested pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8. The yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device and are reminded to vote when their group is called. vote. The yeas are 121. The nays are 303. The noes have it. The objection is not agreed to, and without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the interest of good example to the public of how serious we take part of this. Please return to your offices.
Oh, were you?
I wish to remind members that we have to reduce the number of members on the floor. They're invited to the gallery to witness the proceedings from there in a limited number. So
Ready to proceed in joint session with the House of Representatives.
What was it?